Hey everybody, David Bauders with Hounds, and I'm here today with Steve Maughan. Steve is the SVP of Sales at Siemens. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
So here we are at NECA 25. Tell us what you're seeing and hearing at NECA 25. What's new? What's exciting here?
Yeah. Well, thank you first of all for setting this up. And I've only been here for about half a day so far, but another great event by NECA. So much to see. The technology obviously is what stands out. Walking around the booths, you get to network and meet a lot of old friends, make some new ones, which is why we're here as well, right? But we've had a couple of good sidebar meetings and some interesting topics of conversation, all kind of come back around to how the industry has really changed over, I would say post-pandemic.
I think that was kind of a watershed event in the industry in terms of how people view the world, in terms of how people buy, in terms of how people learn, just so many different things.
I think it's, I always refer to it as pre and post pandemic or pre and post COVID, because I think it is such a stark difference. It's, in fact, the meeting we had earlier, we met with a number of large contractors, almost like a council meeting. And that was one of the key comments, was the fact that, this industry, the construction industry that we kind of play in, hasn't really changed in decades. And yet post-pandemic, with the digital revolution, people having to work from home, having to relearn skills, adapt new technologies, it's really changed the way we go after the market. And then the other key thing that I think everybody's somewhat struggling with, and that you guys help tremendously with, is workforce development, bringing people together. How do we catch up on the years of I wouldn't say neglect, but where we've
Inattention.
And so we've got an aging workforce that everybody's talking about, and we've kind of known it for a long time. I remember being in meetings back in 2012 when we were talking about this bubble that was coming towards us. So I think we've had time to deal with it, but I think the pandemic really accelerated that.
I think one of the things that's interesting, it's expected over the next 5 to 10 years, up to half the electrical workforce will basically aching knees, aching backs, take a bow. And you think about who's replacing these people. These are now Gen Zers,
Yep.
They're next gen digital natives, and I call it the great reshuffling of awareness, of preference, and potentially of market share.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about this reshuffling and how important it is to connect with this new generation.
That's just wow. We could talk on that topic for hours, but I'll try and keep it fairly simple. If you don't mind, I'm going to go back to some personal experiences.
Sure.
So again, talking to our customers, our partners, everybody's in the same boat. The trades, the contractors, the GCs, even the end users they're struggling with the same dynamic. How do you find talent? How do you bring new talent into the industry? And from my personal experience, I think once you crack the code to some extent, the talent's incredible. So, the younger generation, I'm going to call them early career professionals coming out of college, they've been brought up in a completely different world to what I had, you had, right?
Absolutely.
So they behave differently. Doesn't mean to say they're any less capable. In fact, they can be a lot more capable in certain areas. So I think it's all about how you connect with them, how you understand what motivates them, what drives them, how they learn, right? Because I was an apprentice. I left school at 16 and did a 4-year apprenticeship. Went out into the workplace horrified, petrified of all these, 50, 60-year-olds that were picking on the 16-year-old who knew nothing. And it's kind of the same but different, if you understand what I mean.
Absolutely.
So, but we are doing a lot of different things to attract into our organization, talented individuals who've got aspirations and a passion for what we do, even if they don't know really what we do.
Okay.
But at the same time, helping our partners with Educate America, with tools and platforms and systems that we have to kind of try and bring them help in bringing on and training and educating their employees of future, and things like that. And then the other side, the kind of third leg to that stool, for me, is people like yourselves, right? That's the part where you're trying to connect and meet where they're at, right? And
So
you know that better than I do, but I think in my simple brain, they want information in a different way. They want to find it in their own space, and we've got to go and meet them there.
And even, a distinction as simple as manufacturer-provided content versus user-generated content. This is a generation that doesn't trust companies and the way companies speak, and they really want peer-to-peer type of information.
So true. Even I don't want it.
It's a thing.
Even I like to see the new content that's coming out, that whether it's TikTok, whether it's YouTube, whether it's you guys. The difference between what a manufacturer is going to produce, and I think we're aware of it, but we can't help ourselves, is we're always going to focus on the technology rather than who we're trying to educate.
With the application of the technology.
Correct. And I think the difference is with Trade and what you guys do is you've created a community of like-minded individuals who can feed off each other, if I understand it correctly, and from what I've seen and read, and I've seen some of the output from that platform, and it's kind of mind-blowing, and it makes us rethink how we communicate.
I think the big challenge for both manufacturers and their channel partners right now is just how to connect with these people. And it's not going to be just having bricks and mortar. It's not going to be just having delivery trucks. It's got to be, okay, these are people I trust. These are people who are in there with me, and where I can see other people just like myself, in there with them. Well,
one of the big learning curves for us over recent years was actually we have a development program in-house, and what we do is when we hire graduates from all different backgrounds, they're not necessarily engineers. You can teach them technology. Some of the softer skills, communication skills and things like that, you want to kind of hire that if you can and encourage it. And so we were graduating people through our training program. They're somewhat prepared for the outside world. It's back to that 16-year-old who went out there and kind of did a 4-year apprenticeship, thought he knew everything, knew nothing.
Right.
And so what we did is we used to send them all over the country to different assignments once they'd graduated. Now what we do is we keep them in a hub in Atlanta. And you might say, well, there's nothing rocket science about that, but what we do is we keep them in. It gives them more time to mature, gives them more time to get exposure to the technologies, product experts, experienced people around them, but more importantly, the social environment. Because if we send them out into the field, into the world, they're going to be working from an apartment somewhere on their own, isolated,
No culture,
no development, no like-mindedness. And so creating the hub and keeping them there, they typically stay there for about a year or so, and then they kind of drift off into their different assignments, but they're so much more mature, so much more ready. But that was a big learning curve and an aha for us.
And what, in terms of your role in sales, how much of it is working with, let's say strategic accounts, large customers versus managing channel?
So the way our organization, I have a peer, Chris York, good friend of mine. Chris manages our channel, and so more from an operational perspective, how they operate, how we support them. My organization's a demand gen sales organization, so we're out working more with the contractors, the engineering companies, the end users, and trying to drive specification, drive demand back through our channel partners.
Gotcha.
But we overlap because one can't exist without the other. So,
how many sellers do you have supporting you?
We have about 300 in the marketplace across the U.S. in different guises.
As you think about the demographic challenges on the sales side of it, obviously it's the same basic demographic question. What are you doing now to attract top talent into the sales side of it?
It's interesting because we do Power U, which is Power University. It's an in-house week-long training class we do every 2 years. The last one we went to was kind of mind-blowing because we looked out at kind of 500-600 people in the audience, and the demographic was markedly different to what it would have been 5 years earlier. Youth, backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, just a massive shift in just 3 to 5 years. So that was good to see. But you've got to be very aware of how people want to interact, how they can learn, what they want out of their career, and you got to accommodate for that somehow.
As we think about how AI and other technologies are starting to automate away a lot of what I'd call the low-value sales activities, it's kind of forcing a migration of sellers up the value pyramid towards more value-based selling, or let's say business acumen. You talk about how Siemens is creating a more value-adding sales team based on that?
That's a great question and timely question, because again, going back to the shift, we're finding that we're leveraging technology to support our channel much better. So exactly what you said, AI, online content, partnering, ecosystems, digital platforms. So we've got to try and do that because our business is growing so quickly. We've got to take our Siemens qualified sellers and get them higher up the food chain. So we're doing that through training and account management. And if you think about the way our sales force worked traditionally versus what true account management is, it's black and white. They're not the same skill set. Very different. Like you said, more of a solutions consultative type selling, which is very different from a quote-based selling, traditionally that they would more be used to.
The gift of the gab and a charming personality.
A little bit. That, and you nailed it, business acumen, understanding your customer and what their dynamics are and what they need.
Yeah, a lot of the buyer research shows right now that buyers' biggest point of dissatisfaction with modern sellers is their lack of business acumen. They say basically, our sellers, the sellers who sell to us, don't understand how we make money and can't connect what they do to how to improve our business outcomes.
So I always that anyone who sees this, who knows me, they'll kind of roll their eyes. I always say that you need to be a student of your customer's business and a student of Siemens, because your job is to bring those two worlds together. Look for mutual benefit, overlap. And it's not just in the breaker technology or the switchboard technology. It's software, it's energy management, it's what's driving their business, what's making business decisions for them, how do they plan to grow, and how can we help that? If we can help them grow, then there's a much better chance that we're going to do more business together.
So what's Siemens' approach to building up business acumen? Like, do you have a formal sales skills training program that helps the seller to start to cross that chasm?
Yeah, we do. So we have global programs, which are not always the best in terms of fitting to the US-based mindset and culture, but the framework and the kind of
sales methodology, business acumen, it translates.
Okay. So putting a US-based spin on that, so we'll typically take a global program, which is really well thought out and put together, and then we'll Americanize it, we'll bring it to the US, we'll do train the trainer, so our people in the US can train and educate, which kind of helps kind of bridge that any kind of clunkiness that exists, but then brings in some, we employ some really experienced business leaders and qualified sales trainers that have actually carried a bag, done the job, and then they bring all that experience and bring it back to that training framework and apply it.
Is it mostly live training, or is it virtual, or kind of a cross?
That's a great question. We do a bit of both. So typically you can't get people face-to-face for too long these days. So we try and do it in blocks.
Another post-COVID outcome.
Another post-COVID. The good thing is, though, people have learned how to utilize that training and adapt to it much more broadly, much more accepting of it than they were pre-COVID, but it's still, face-to-face is always preferable.
Talk about how you help your managers to become, let's say, force multipliers in this whole equation.
Again, I think the challenge we're all faced with there is getting the business is moving at such a high speed that the managers can very quickly get sucked into the day-to-day grind.
Or just being the superstar closer.
Being the superstar closer, being the expediter, being the one who knows. And the other thing, going back to your original point of, we've turned over probably 30% of the sales organization with new sellers coming into the market. They don't have the experience. So there's a lot more hand-holding, a lot more coaching, developing on-the-job nurturing, great word, of talent. So the managers get pulled into that too. So we're doing training around strategic thought, strategic management. We've spent a lot of time on coaching because typically in our industry, our managers come from the floor. So they are salespeople or engineers or something like that. They're not natural coaches. So we've spent a lot of time in trying to develop their coaching skills so that they can be that nurturing influence and that coaching influence as well.
I think one of the tricks is when you hire salespeople, you're generally hiring them to be frontline sellers.
Correct.
And then unfortunately, when you get to the point where you need managers, you're promoting from people who are qualified as being frontline sellers, but who didn't have the traits necessarily to be great managers.
It's something we're aware of, but I think historically that was definitely the case. And you've kind of inherited a lot of that mentality and a lot of that, in the existing sales organization. But as we're bringing new managers into the organization, they are coming from a different world, and so we are a lot more mindful of what it takes to be a good manager. And it's not just be that super closer.
I think that's the tricky part. Everybody who knows you ring the bell, right? When you get the big order, you get the big client. But how do you measure the success of the sales team at adding value beyond, box ticking and all of that?
So I think a big part of that is getting into the broader sales processes. It's also, it's how do we sell and metrics around how we sell. So for example, CRM plays a big part of that. Again, not a fan favorite of the traditional seller. Again, the younger generation, it's kind of second nature to them because they have that digital literacy. They just pick it up so much faster. But we focused on the processes of selling. So if it's account management, it's account planning. It's not just sales closed and pipeline. There's a lot more around, velocity, pipeline velocity, customer relationship velocity. Then you get into things like personal development and setting benchmarks on personal development. And we challenge the team to spend a number of hours on themselves, right? So we have a ton of training material.
Competency assessments,
gap analysis, get together with your manager, understand, we'll do a manager assessment and an individual assessment, and then we'll bring the two worlds together and look to develop a training and development path that goes beyond just the technology.
What about sales analytics? What types of analytics do your frontline sellers have to help them be better, let's say, value-added partners to their customers and help you guys drive top line?
Yeah, that's a world that's evolving so fast as well, and again, benefits the early career professionals because a lot of it's digital. A lot of it's integrated, it's digital. So we're using AI more and more to analyze opportunity, prospects of a successful opportunity, account planning. We're doing things like, we're just moving into the world of AI agents. So if you're an account manager and you're responsible for an account, you've got a personal assistant there that's looking at gathering all the intelligence. Think ChatGPT for you and your customer. And it's out there constantly looking at your email trail, looking at your pipeline, looking at your relationship mapping, and it's kind of building a picture, and it'll come and recommend. And they say, hey, you might find this useful. Oh, by the way, you're going to talk to so-and-so about X. He's their interest. It'll link their business drivers to our business drivers and make pitch recommendations. So now it's in its infancy. I wouldn't like to say we've cracked the code, but I get excited about it.
At least you're on the learning curve.
Oh, I get so excited. I come from a technology background and on the automation side. So when I get into that digital world, it really kind of fires me up. So when I see what we can do to drive productivity and efficiencies and leverage AI and for the benefit of everybody, it's exciting.
And I know you guys are, as you're managing strategic accounts, a lot of that involves negotiation. The key is not only to create value for the customer, but also to capture value for shareholders. how effectively does the sales team negotiate terms of trade with your customer base to make sure you're getting paid for the value you bring?
Well, I think value is created at the front end. And I think that's where, ideologically, that's where we want to be, right? And that's where we're trying to take our sales organization for the last 3 years, is to get closer to the end customer through the value chain, get in early, so that we can genuinely be a technology partner to our customer, help them be more successful. The last thing you want to be is where we were 5-10 years ago, where it's 3 bids and a buy on a spec job.
Yeah.
Right? And I think again that's massively shifted. So if it comes to negotiations, and you're one of 3 or 4 options, and you haven't made a value proposition that resonates and differentiates, so you have a point of difference, then I think it's a tough negotiation.
A race to the bottom.
It's a race to the bottom. And so it's all about trying to get in earlier in the cycle and making sure that we can genuinely add value and create a point of difference that people recognize. And if we do that well, I'm not saying the margins are through the roof, but it puts us in a lot better position, because we're not just bringing a product to market, we're bringing expertise, knowledge, partnership, opening doors that maybe they'd never even thought of in the past.
So as you're onboarding new sellers, how much formal skills training do they get in negotiation to help them be effective at that?
So I would say that's room for improvement, to be brutally honest. I think we're focusing mainly on the core selling processes, selling skills, business acumen, strategy. I think negotiations are a subset of that. I think we place more emphasis on the sales process and trying to get in early and create a point of difference than going into
the
traditional.
Root causes rather than
Exactly. Get out in front of it rather than try and be clever.
Resolve it at the end.
Be clever with your negotiation at the end. We still want them to do that, of course.
How do you measure success at that? I mean, I guess you sort of know by when you engage and the terms of engagement, and how often, I guess conversely, what % of your revenue comes from that RFP process, right?
Well, the funny thing is, you talk about terms, that's a big part of it. We actually go in and try and, we try and take the barriers away way before the order comes. So we try and establish a relationship so we can have a business relationship and we can focus on the customer and what their needs are, and we're not worrying about terms and conditions and negotiation, fighting at the back end. So there's some of that. Repeat the question again.
So it's like, what are the metrics? Like, how do you know whether you're doing well flipping it towards this less RFP type of approach? I mean, I guess RFPs, if you can track how much of your revenue as a result of RFPs, the inverse of that or converse of that is basically your early stage value add, right? Something like that?
So we focus, at a macro level, we focus on profitability and share, right? So we're looking at those 2 metrics, but we take that down to an account level. So when we're working with a strategic account, trying to create a true partnership, we're looking at share of wallet, right? So we'll work and analyze what their spend is, what they buy in the market, and we'll set targets around, if we're a good partner to a customer, we'll grow our share position. We'll take a bigger position. Volume's always important, right? You always want to increase your sales and things like that, but I think, sales go up and down as the markets go up and down, as opportunities come up and down, but share is a critical metric that we look at. And so share of account, share of wallet is something that we focus on.
And how much of this shows up, the outcome of negotiation shows up in terms of ongoing contracts with your customers, where you have, specified pricing, volume breaks, rebates, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Certainly in the channel side. So if you're looking at our distribution channel, SPAs, agreements, purchase pricing, basic pricing, etc. So a lot of that's done through the channel, which is not my kind of bailiwick.
Sure.
I think I focus more on the accounts and project side of the business.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, we do that. Obviously, we try and set that up, especially around the small project flow business, our distribution partners, etc.
Well, Steve, it's great to spend time with you. It's been
Thank
a great
you very
partnership.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.